Welcome to the video series Transforming with SteepGraph PLM-ERP Integration Insights Part 2, Key Data Strategies and Best Practices, featuring Lars, Peder, Hanson, and Chuck Nyberg. Let's dive into today's topic. Key insights you will learn from this video are: what key data should be exchanged between PLM and ERP systems? Who is the publisher and consumer? Which stakeholders are crucial in the ERP PLM integration process, and what are their roles? How can data ownership and modifications be managed effectively in bidirectional integrations? Should documents be transferred or linked between systems? And what factors influence this choice? How do ERP system limitations affect integration strategies?
SteepGraph Tuesday video. This is Chuck Nyberg coming to you with another conversation with Lars Hanson to discuss the PLM ERP integration. Okay, in a previous video, we talked about the organizational questions and how important communication is for the integration. And we now want to design this integration. So now the decision has been made that we want to integrate the two. Lars, what do you think the next step is that people should take?
Well, the next step, and this is very dear to my heart. I've been working with this for many years. The next step is basically to sit down and figure out how do we want to do it. What do we want to communicate between the PLM and the ERP systems? And that varies, of course, from company to company. But I would say that, first of all, realize that this is all about data. It's not so much about what PLM system do you have, what ERP system do you have, and what can they do. It's about your data. It's about the value that's in your data. So I guess the first thing to do really is to sit down with all the stakeholders. And when we are involving ERP, that's many people normally. Sit down with all the stakeholders and identify what data do you want to communicate between the two systems. And very important also, figure out what data is publisher what system is publisher and what system is the consumer of the data, because that may go in both directions here. And as a part of that, you also need to figure out, okay, we now know that the PLM system owns this chunk of data, this field here. Where may it be modified? There's not a one-to-one between publisher and consumer, and where do you modify the data? Sometimes the consumer, I've seen this in practical terms sometimes the consumer application is actually also allowed to modify data. But this is a piece of work that you need to do. Sit down, figure out what data do you want to communicate between the two systems. Is it one directional or is it bi-directional? You want to communicate this data. Where does it belong? Who's the publisher and who's the consumer of it? And I would say, especially when it's bi-directional, you need to take care there. A simple example is that you create your, let's say, 2D drawings in your PLM system. And for many reasons, you want those 2D drawings to be available in your ERP system. Now, that's relatively straightforward. The PLM system is the publisher. The ERP system is the consumer. And if the data needs to be changed, there is no question about it, more or less. That, of course, happens in the PLM system. But it's not always that simple. And you need to think this through before you start, really. And then I would say the next thing to consider is, do you want to send documents back and forth between the two systems, or do you want to send links? Now, documents is, if we take the example with the 2D drawing from your PLM system, could very well be a traditional PDF file that you want to send over. But there's a distinction here. Do you actually want to send the PDF file over into your ERP system? Or do you want to create a link to it so that when people use the ERP system, they will actually open the file from the PLM system? two very different ways of doing it. And be aware that not all ERP systems actually handle documents. That's a gotcha there. I guess, Chuck, you are familiar with the Oracle applications. They don't handle documents as shots. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Not
Okay.
like SAP.
No. Versus SAP that has a functionality built in that can handle documents. So you may be forced to use links, but in my experience, use links whenever you can. There's the traditional arguments because you save space, but links is also very much better at handling the single source of truth question that always comes up when you use PLM in your company. When you have one document and a number of links to it, you make sure that people look at the same document. The moment you copy a document from one environment to another, there's always the risk that it changes in one environment without being changed for some reason in the other. And your users could be looking at two different versions of what should be the same thing. So links, in my personal opinion, is the way to go if you can. But there may also be arguments for actually using files.
I agree with your links, where I've seen that in the past, where the sync didn't happen for some reason or another, and things were built with the wrong drawings, right, which can be quite costly.
Yes, it's it's happening out there. We know that, and as you say, that can be quite, if not very costly sometimes. Another thing, if you want to use documents, I would strongly advise that you think about what is native files, neutral files, derived files, viewable files. I sometimes see companies mix this up in one way. When you work with a CAD system, let's take CATIA as an example. The CATIA file is certainly a native file. That may not be very usable viewed from somewhere else or even copied to somewhere else. Many times you will have to revert to neutral files, such as STEP and IGES and other files that you can then send over to other systems. But be aware, again, these are derived files. If you have a native file that is your source of truth for whatever design you're doing, and you derive a file from it and send that somewhere, again, we have this risk of things coming out of sync. And you also may want to think about viewable files. Again, native CAD files have a lot of limitations when it comes to everybody looking at them. Often you need the CAD application in itself, which is normally not the case. It's expensive and so on. So you may want to use viewable files such as JTs or 3D PDFs, or all of these very nice data types that we have out there. But be aware that they are derived from the single source of truth. So be very much careful about where you copy them to, where you move them to. If you want to read more about this native, neutral, derived, viewable thing, there's a military standard, actually, MIL standard 31000B, that has some very usable information about this. I learned a lot from reading that one. But again, be aware of what you are sending. Is it a native? Is it a neutral? Is it derived, or just a viewable file? Get that right, then you come a long way. Right.
What I would suggest that, like you kind of alluded to, is whatever you do, you definitely need to collaborate with everybody who's going to have access to this information in whatever ERP system you have. So that's definitely a collaborative, and even map out exactly what you need. Because there's going to be information that are probably not parts and bombs. There could be additional information like, okay, here's requirements you have to follow, for example. Something you never really thought you would need to send them. Parts, bombs, that's kind of obvious, but there are probably another not so obvious things, right? So that's why it's good to map out everything on what does manufacturing really need? What does global supply chain need? Sourcing, whatever they use the ERP for.
Right. That is that is correct, Chuck. And it's a big chunk of work. It's not something you do, but I would recommend though that remember the quick wins. This whole thing about integrating PLM and ERP is something that will take a long time. And what I've seen happen in companies is that you go out and tell management, you tell users that now you've started this project, you want to integrate so you can see your data from both PLM and ERP, and you communicate as we discussed the last time, and you communicate once again because that's important. But what I've seen happen is that quick wins are important and they're easy to get actually, because I've experienced that when users and also management see just the very first beginning. They see something that was created in the PLM system, and now all of a sudden it's viewable in ERP. Then the opposition or the doubts that may be in the company about this whole thing tends to vanish at the very first sight of something that is actually working. So get your quick wins, get something simple up and running first, demonstrate that, and then build on that. That's definitely the best way to do it. A big bang approach where you sit down in a meeting room for 2 years and then finally white smoke comes out and everything now works won't really cut it. Get the quick wins and build on it. That's definitely the best way to do it. Yeah. Once you've gotten the basic stuff working, parts, maybe bombs, we'll come back to bombs in another video here. There's things like change management, which also in many companies is a candidate to live both in PLM and ERP. I worked with companies where a change was initiated in the ERP system. It got a unique identifier in the ERP system, and it got some initial description of what needs to be changed. And that was then transferred back into the PLM system where it automatically created a change notice and change orders and the whole mechanism there. And once the change was done in the PLM system, that was communicated back to the ERP system that change number 1, 2, 3, 4 is now ready and so on. That adds a layer of complexity, but I think it's worth looking into for most companies because change management is complex and many companies struggle with it. And if you can get this ping pong between the PLM and the ERP to work right with change management, you've also come quite a long way.
And you bring a good point there too about the complexity, right? So as part of the decision making of data is, like you said, your example of change management is really good, right? So if it happens on one side, how complex or how do processes change now? Because that's going to be affected on what the final decision is who owns what. I've had it where if PLM owned the data, then they had to shut off the ability to edit that data in the ERP system to make sure it doesn't happen. So those things as well. Security, right? Because PLM has security in it to prevent people from doing certain things or seeing certain things. So definitely, and data especially. So the idea is so when you push that into ERP, you still keep the security even for that data. Who can see it, who can't, who can manipulate it. That all has to be addressed as well as part of the data.
Yes, security is something that often surprises people, that when you have two big systems like PLM and ERP, you may have your security set up correctly in both of them, but normally with different mechanisms. And now when you start making data from one system viewable from the other system, then you may inadvertently break your security rules. So keep an eye on that also. That in itself is a task. Which leads me to my probably final comment in this short video about this integration, that just as you must determine what data do we want to integrate, what should flow from where to where, and all of these things we just talked about, you should also definitely define what should trigger that exchange of information between the two systems. Now, if we look at the traditional flow where you design in your PLM system, and at some point you send over the result of all your work to the ERP system so that purchasing and production and everyone else can start working on it. The traditional way of doing that is to not tell the ERP anything, so to speak, before you hit the released state in the PLM system. Because when you release, you lock. That means that any links from the ERP system will show the same no matter when they're used. And also released normally has a bearing on the security mechanism. When you release things, this is where you say, okay, now we are ready to show, if not the world, then at least our own organization, what we have created here. But I do have examples of companies where the ERP users have expressed their need to look at PLM data before it is released. There may be good reasons for that. For instance, purchasing may want to get an early warning about what is coming so that they can start working on whatever they need to do do their work in the best possible ways. So they wanted to see data as it was evolving, designs as they were evolving in the PLM system. Again, there's a security risk you need to be aware of there, and there's also the risk of someone saying, okay, I saw that yesterday, let me go out and buy the bolts and nuts I need for it. And then the day after, the designer changes everything. So if you do that, if you do communicate before the released state, before the locked state, be very careful. It may be an idea to do so, but be careful about it. That's my best advice, really.
Yeah, to add on to that one, so the experience says that once at least PLM, engineering has no control over it anymore. So the next system, let's say in this case ERP, does not really know what the life cycle is of it in PLM. It just knows, hey, it's in here, so now I can do whatever I want. So in theory, you pushing something, regardless of what PLM says, you push it to ERP, it's now available for their use, which means it's released.
Yes, so, that's what happens in the real world there.
And they go purchase something that hasn't even been fully defined yet. Exactly. So yes, no, I've seen that plenty of times where we just want to take a look at it, and then that one person could have said that, but someone else saw it, said, oh, they must be done. So you can't even control who sees it in the ERP system. They just thought, I see a number, must be done, I'm going to start work.
Yes, it happens. I'm glad you experienced that too, Chuck. It's not just me.
No, it's just out of your control. So basically the idea is once it's out of PLM, it's now, that's regardless of what PLM says. You're sharing it, which is what release says, really. I'm done, it's now usable. So to start distributing it before it's ready is not a good practice.
It's risky, definitely.
Yes.
Okay, I think that was a little talk about all of these things that goes into an integration year. It's a big issue, and we haven't even touched on bombs yet, but I guess that's what I have to say right now about it.
Okay, so to your point, just kind of sum it up, obviously this is a collaborative effort. We got to get the team involved. Everybody has to be involved to decide what information needs to be communicated both ways. What data is important, what each one wants, who owns the data, who can edit it, who cannot, security, and also what triggers the push from one system to the other. Pretty much that sums it up.
Yes, that sums it up.
Okay.
Nicely.
Okay, I have no other questions. You have any more anything left to say before we end this?
No, not really. Again, we are here at SteepGraph. We're ready to discuss this more in detail with us. So get in touch with us if you have any questions or comments, or if you disagree with something of what we've just been saying. We're always happy to discuss and learn more.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Lars. And I guess we'll continue on our next one, which is going to be about bombs.
Yes.
Summary of the video
bombs,
is,
so that'll be good.
This is all about data, more so than about PLM and ERP tools. First, map out the relevant data and identify what data belongs where. Be very clear on which system is data author and which is data consumer. Consider whether it is relevant to move documents or links to documents. Some ERP systems do not handle documents at all. Determine what should trigger the exchange of data. Normally, it makes sense to initiate exchange at a lifecycle step change in PLM. Release is the common one. Questions for you. What would be the most important functionality for a PLM-ERP integration in your company? Do you want to exchange data fields, documents, or links, or all of them? How much did you involve other stakeholders in IT? And did they contribute and follow up? Get insights on PLM-ERP integration from the experts. Have questions? Our team is here to help. Connect with us for personalized guidance or visit our website at www.steepgraph.com. You can also drop your queries at marketing@steepgraph.com. Let's simplify PLM-ERP integration together.